Welcome in to Daily Faceoff Live, your go-to source for everything hockey. Live every weekday at noon Eastern.
Welcome in, hockey fans, to a Wednesday, November 22nd edition of Daily Faceoff Live. I'm Tyler Remchuk. He's our hockey insider, Frank Saravalli. The show, as always, is brought to you by Vatrano. 14-game slate tonight in the NHL, and Vatrano's got all the odds and player props you could dream of for tonight's slate. Frank, how you doing? Day before Thanksgiving.
I am so excited. Thanksgiving is my favorite holiday. I know. Hide the shock. Fat guy likes to eat. But yeah, I just like everything about it. 4-day weekend. You've got friends and family, football, cocktails. I mean, it's about as good as it gets. I know Christmas is great for the kids, but Thanksgiving is a really fun time too. And you're going to get to experience your first Thanksgiving in the US. I'm having you over for the weekend, of course. So, yeah, looking forward to having you here.
Yeah, I've been cruising around New York City for the last day and a little bit, and everything's getting set up for the Macy's parade and like all the TV networks, everything. It's a pretty cool spot to be. But there's also a lot of hockey on tonight, Frank. A 14-game slate, like I said off the top. So let's not waste any time. Let's get into our Thanksgiving themed show and start with the pressure that comes with this date. You know, everyone always looks at the standings on American Thanksgiving. We know the stats. You have a very small chance of getting back into the mix if you're not in the mix by Thanksgiving. So let's take a look around the league, Frank. Which teams have changed your opinions of them the most here through 6-7 weeks in the NHL season?
I'll give you two in the East to start, and one of them is the Florida Panthers. I have to admit I was completely wrong about this team before the season started. I thought they would be in a spot very similar to the Edmonton Oilers now. A good team, but with some deficiencies, needing to have a monster last 60 games of the season to get back into the race, only because they were missing their top two defensemen, Aaron Ekblad and Brendan Montour. Those guys are now back. And not only did they survive, they have thrived basically on the back of that ridiculous offense. Sam Reinhart has had an unreal season. They've gotten competent goaltending, and they've gotten other guys like Oliver Ekman-Larsson to pick up the slack and play 23 minutes a night. That's been incredibly impressive. Another team that's completely changed my view of them by way of their coaching change has been the New York Rangers. We had been talking for the last couple seasons about Gerard Gallant, how loosey-goosey this team was in front of Igor Shesterkin, and how over-reliant they were on Shesterkin to bail them out most nights. They've got an incredible defense core, and they're extremely mobile. They've buttoned things up in their own end in a big way under Peter Laviolette, and their offense continues to shine. Artemi Panarin, Hart Trophy candidate to start this year. Those are two teams in the East that I think have been incredible to start and have really changed my view of them in terms of how we think about them in the cup contender category.
Yeah, I love that Rangers answer, because I think a lot of times with this question, or at least where my thought went, was, okay, who are some teams that we thought would be good or great who have been bad, or the reverse, bad teams who have been good or great this year? But the Rangers, I mean, we all expected them to be a playoff team, but were they a true cup contender after the disappointing end of last season? And this year, yeah, they've definitely shown they belong in that conversation. For me, I'll take an easy one out west for you, Frank. It's the Vancouver Canucks. Again, I thought this was a team that would be capable of getting into the playoffs. 7-8 seed in the West. Man, I mean, if they play 500 hockey, they're not going to be like 500 hockey from here on out. They won't just be a wild card team. They'll be a divisional team. They might even have home ice based on how good this start's been.
Yeah, and I would say in a negative way, a team that's really changed how I think about them is the Calgary Flames. I went into this season with an open mind saying, hey, you and I were both in Calgary together for training camp. It just felt so different there. It was so positive. And I thought that collection of talent would be a lot better than it's been. Something's off, something's missing. The vibes have been better in the last 7 to 10 days, but I just don't know that it's enough to not only even get into the playoffs, but I think the real key and what Calgary has to ask themselves on a macro level is, can we be a threat to win? And that's really what matters. And I don't have them in that category. And that's why I think they need some major surgery.
Yeah, the Flames are in an interesting spot, and that'll tie in to the next topic for me and my answers, Frank. But it's time for our turkey call. Gobble, 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 Frank. We're going to give out our turkeys of the year around the NHL. I got a couple different ways I want to go, but I'll let you go first. Who are the biggest turkeys in the hockey world for you?
Oh, you mean aside from Tim Peel, a former NHL ref, barking about accountability on social media? I'm sorry. Yeah, I've got a few turkeys for you. Jarmo Kekalainen in Columbus and the totally toxic environment that he's created there. It's a terrible scene for their young players. You know, you think of Kent Johnson coming off of a 40-point season as a 19-year-old, David Jiricek, sixth overall pick, better than four of their defensemen right now, healthy, scratched multiple games, sent down to the minors. You think of some of the other guys that have been through there, Sillinger, and now you've got Fantilli in the mix. You are healthy, scratching Patrick Laine, benching Johnny Gaudreau. Your coach, 19 games into his career, is telling everyone how tired he is of the whole thing. They just need to sweep the whole thing out. Total wholesale changes. So Jarmo Kekalainen, first turkey. Second turkey is Nikita Zadorov for his not so subtle on the nose trade request in Toronto, making it public before he even had a conversation with the Calgary Flames. And yeah, I think all it's done is hurt his chances, and people see right through that and has left him with some questions to answer from his own teammates. Third one for me is anyone who thought the Boston Bruins wouldn't be good this year. As we mentioned before the season started, they could have given back 18 wins last season and still had 100 points this season. I think that's just a good team that's being driven by an absolute superstar in David Pastrnak, who should be getting more Hart Trophy love. And I would say when you think about how this whole season has unfolded to this point, my other turkey, got to go with the Edmonton Oilers goaltending, but we'll get to that in a second.
Yeah, that's going to be our fourth topic. Frank's got an article up at Daily Faceoff. Love the Blue Jackets one, Frank. Love the Zadorov one, but I'm going to go in a different way with the Flames, and I'm going to lump them into a bigger conversation. My turkeys are teams in hockey's purgatory. These guys who, they avoided a sell-off in the summer. They wanted to give it one last run with their cores, and I'm looking at the Nashville Predators, who I know switched up their core, but still didn't buy into any sort of a rebuild. And then the Calgary Flames. I mean, you look at those two teams, they're not terrible, but they're not good. They're not good enough to go on long playoff runs. What they should have done this summer is sold off a few more assets, rounded up a bunch of first-round picks and high-end prospects, had 1 year of pain, and then seeing if they could turn it around in the way that the LA Kings did, right? That was a short, effective retool they went through a number of years ago. And I think there's just a few too many teams around the league, even Philly, who's off to a great start. Man, you should want to be bad if you're Philly, and you should be aiming to be on the upswing as Michkov comes over. If you're the Flames, you should have sold off Lindholm and Hanifin, picked up a ton of quality assets for selling off a full season of them, had a bad year or two, and if you're the Flames, start peaking up as that new building starts to come together in Calgary. I just feel like there's too many teams who are, striving just to be average and struggling to do so.
Yeah, I think those are some great points. I would say the good news for the Flames is I think they're changing that view and can get there, and they still have time to move out those pieces. The next thing, I would totally agree with the Flyers, but the Preds have gone into this eyes wide open. Talked to Barry Trotz last week for an upcoming edition of Frankly Speaking. You can check that out probably next week. And he was very clear in saying they're not trying to make the playoffs this year. They're just trying to be a little bit competitive. They wanted to change the culture around their team, and they think 3 years from now is when they can get back to being a top-level team again.
I will throw you three other names that I had on my turkey list, Frank. Arbor Xhekaj, Frank Vatrano, and Tom Wilson. Would you like to know why those three? Take a guess. Why do you think those three are my turkeys?
I really don't know why.
They're the three leaders in minor penalties taken this year. Frank Vatrano probably gets a pass. We can scratch him off the list because he has more goals than minor penalties at 11, but Xhekaj and Wilson, the only two other players to have 11 minor penalties on the year. Stay out of the box, you turkeys.
Yeah, hit the net, you turkey.
Yeah. Bag secured is our next topic here, Frank. And there's a couple of players. We've talked a little bit about them over the last week because extensions are a big topic of conversation right now. And it's William Nylander and Frank Vatrano. The way I'm going to, Elias Pettersson and William Nylander. Jesus, turkey brain on me. But these two, when you look at what you maybe thought of what could be their extension price and their cap hit at the start of the year, to maybe what they could be looking at now, Frank, which one of these two young stars has made themselves the most money so far this season?
It's a great question, and it's one that I've thought a lot about. And I think if you're talking total dollars, like who put more total dollars in their pocket at the end of the day, and let's just be clear, we're probably operating under the assumption for both of these guys, and this might be unfair, you're thinking 8-year deal. So if you're thinking 8-year deal for both, I'd say that it's probably Nylander. I think Nylander has taken himself from the $10 million range to 11.5 or 12. And so it's probably somewhere between 12 to $18 million that he's really, put in his pocket as a result of this. I think Pettersson was somewhere that, obviously, coming off of a 100-point season, people expected this guy to not just duplicate that, but maybe try and kind of get to that next level. And he's done that, and he's done it at the same time as everyone else in Vancouver, which has been really fun to watch. But I think the gap between where Pettersson was and where he is now probably isn't quite as big as Nylander.
Yeah, I mean, if Pedersen would have came, like I tried to look at this as okay, if Nylander would have came in and had a bad season this year, he still would have been a pending UFA, going to open market, probably would have gotten the bag somewhere, even if maybe it wasn't Toronto. When I look at Pedersen, if he would have came out and if the Canucks would have had a bad season, Frank, and Pedersen would have been only at like the 60, 70 point mark, he might not have gotten a long-term deal, right? Like it might have been a bridge situation. So now you look at the fact he appears to be a slam dunk, or at least he should be, to get that long-term contract from the Canucks. Yeah, I think the answer to this question is very clearly Pedersen. Those two getting a lot of money. Another guy who's probably put a lot of money in his jeans, Sam Reinhart. I mean, we're looking at a guy who, as an unrestricted free agent, should get a big, big contract this summer.
Yeah, 3 straight 30-goal seasons, has done nothing but produce for the Florida Panthers since that trade. And it's funny. I was having this discussion with an NHL GM a couple days ago. That trade looks really good, and it could look really good for both sides. It's a rare sort of win-win. You get Reinhart, you give up Devin Levi, but if you think about where the Panthers were at that exact moment in time, they had Bobrovsky long-term. They had just drafted Spencer Knight. Not really a path for Devin Levi to come forward. And, you get Reinhart in exchange. I know there's a pick involved, but still might be a win-win.
Yeah, it really looks like it could be. Speaking of trades, the Oilers, boy, Ken Holland must be feeling the pressure to make some sort of a change here to get the Oilers a goalie. I know they started Calvin Pickard the other day. He looked fine, but still not a long-term solution between the pipes for the Oilers. There's a couple of different ways they'll go, but a lot of people have been connecting the Oilers to Montreal, Frank. So I'll start with that. Out of those 3 goalies in the Montreal, or on their roster, not even in their system, all 3 are on the NHL roster right now. Which one is the most likely to get moved?
It's Jake Allen. I think just from a pure stability standpoint for the Oilers, like you would want the vet, the guy who has been around for 400 games, the one who has a strong track record and consistent track record in this league. I think there's 2 things that are working against Jake Allen in heading to Edmonton. One is I think you have to be concerned about his injury history. In the last number of years, he's only played more than 35 games in a season once. So that part stands out to me. Reliability and dependability is one of the biggest abilities that you can have. And then 2 is acquisition price. I have a story up now on dailyfaceoff.com, wrote it this morning, looking at 5 realistic options for the Oilers in net. And on a 1 to 5 scale, as you can see here, Allen was sort of in the mid-range in terms of prices. You've got James Reimer from Detroit as the least expensive, and Carter Hart from Philadelphia as the most expensive, and for good reason. Me personally, if I were to take a look at this list and you had to pick one goalie to target, it would be Reimer, because for me, I think he's got the best blend of inexpensive acquisition cost, because the Red Wings are another one of those teams that's carrying 3 goalies. They've got Ville Husso. They have Alex Lyon. Those guys can just kind of take over, and having both of them probably isn't going to drastically change Detroit's playoff hopes. And he's really consistent. 14 years in the NHL. He's only had 1 season ever that James Reimer hasn't been above a 900 save percentage. And it was last year, playing in front of an awful San Jose team that played no defense. This year, goes to Detroit, bounces back so far with a 917. He's got a 911 save percentage for his career. So let me put that into perspective for you in terms of exactly what that means. Mackenzie Blackwood was once thought of as one of the bright young goaltending up-and-coming stars in this league. 2 years ago, around this time, we were talking about Mackenzie Blackwood as a potential Team Canada Olympic candidate. Well, Mackenzie Blackwood's best 100-game stretch in his career his save percentage was 911. That's for 3 years. James Reimer's career average over 14 years is 911, and that's his average. That was Mackenzie Blackwood's best. So for me, there are options, and I think you have to say goodbye to the idea of UC Saros. I had Barry Trotz's quotes in the story about why he's not trading Saros, and also Jeremy Swayman or Linus Ullmark from the Bruins. Those guys have been lights out historically, on pace for the best goaltending tandem in 40 years in the NHL. And there's really no incentive for the Bruins to trade those guys because they really should be relying on both of them down the stretch.
Yeah, I think out of that list, I'd prefer Blackwood from an Oilers perspective, just because I think a part of this needs to be trying to offload Jack Campbell as well. Is Detroit going to be willing to take Jack Campbell? No, the deal, and I wrote about this over at Oilers Nation, if you retain $2 million on Campbell, you might not even need to have to attach that much to it from a futures asset to get Blackwood, because the money will basically be a wash. Like if you did a first in Campbell at $2 million retained for Blackwood, if you're the Oilers, you save $700K. If you're the Sharks, you're basically paying $700K for each of the next 2 years.
Yeah.
And then that last year.
I got to stop you though, because I don't think it makes any sense for the Oilers to retain at all, because then you have the dead cap money on your books, as opposed to it's like you might as well just bury him at that point and not pay a significant asset. If you're going to move Jack Campbell, you have to get rid of the whole thing. San Jose could take the whole thing. Arizona could take the whole thing on that list. So could the Philadelphia Flyers. So that's something that I think the Oilers have to be really careful about here, is how they go about this process, because if they're moving Jack Campbell and if they're paying a real price, the idea is so that they then would have additional flexibility when it comes to the trade deadline in March to then pull something else off if you need to.
Yeah, and that's fair as well. Getting out of that full deal would be a big win for Ken Holland and the Oilers front office at this point. Let's continue along with the show here, Frank, and get to our big segment today. It's the Players Room with Luke Gazdic. The Players Room, as always, is delivered by DoorDash. For a limited time, our Canadian listeners can get 25% off and 0 delivery fees on their first order of $15 or more when they download the DoorDash app and use the promo code NATION25. That is all capitals, NATION25. DoorDash. Dash that for the win and make DoorDash your holiday hack this holiday season. Always a pleasure to welcome Luke Gazdic into the program on Daily Faceoff Live. And Luke, I saw you hanging out there in the waiting room, so you probably heard our opening question of which team has changed your opinion of them early on this year. American Thanksgiving, always such a big benchmark for us in terms of how we view teams. It always feels like you kind of know what you got in all 32 by the time we get to this point. So who's changed your opinion of them the most?
Yeah, well, first and foremost, I'm an avid listener and watcher too, guys. So I'm always joining early. I know what's going on. It's easy for me to go out west and say Vancouver. I've talked about them a lot, especially on TV. But for me, it's the Cats. It's the Florida Panthers in the East. I thought this team doesn't have Bennett, Montour, Ekblad to start their season for months. As long as they can hang on and kind of stay in that Atlantic, they would be okay, but they'd be battling and grinding for a playoff spot. But Sam Reinhart's play, I know Barkov's injured, but they've been fantastic, man. They play so fast. Reinhart mentioned Paul Maurice and how he just has those guys going where they're not even thinking. They're just, they know how to play, and you hear them say they play the right way a lot of the time, but it's probably going to be the Florida Panthers for me in the East, especially in the Atlantic, where you still have Tampa, Boston still humming, Toronto, all those guys. So I'll go with the Cats.
Luke, there's been no shortage of underachievers so far this year. So I want you to pick one out of this group and tell me which one you think can make it back into the mix. So I'll give you Edmonton, Minnesota, the Islanders, and I'll throw in the Calgary Flames.
Oh, man. Well, it's the Oilers. I know it's the team I cover the most, but it's a toss-up for me between Edmonton and Calgary. I think I'm just not a huge Islanders fan. They play this defensive style, and they're not scoring any goals right now. Their big boys aren't even doing much at the top of their lineup. But I just look at Edmonton and I look at their offense and the shots on goal and all these advanced stats that say their numbers are going to turn around. I think Stu Skinner is just having a bad stretch here. I think a goaltender would help them, but a lot of the stuff I see on the ice when I watch and analyze is just kind of, system mistakes, and it's coaching stuff. And whether you think Woody should have been fired or not, whether Woodcroft should have been shown the door, I think there's a lot of coaching errors that can be fixed in this if you really go through the video and you play the tape for these guys and
give me an example.
Have some more structure in their game. I'll talk about the game-winning goal in Florida, Bouchard's pinch in the neutral zone. I love Bouchard on the offensive side of the puck. I think he's one of the best offensively skilled defensemen the league has to offer, but he's got to know in a situation like that unless you have forward help behind you, Ekholm does it perfectly. There was like 3 or 4 examples in the game where they'll force up in the neutral zone. Ekholm knows he has the forwards behind him 100%. He can step up, shut down the offense in the neutral zone. But Bush can't pinch there in that situation. He has Brownie on his right side, maybe 50-50, but he's also inside the wall. So he can't step up there. So that's kind of just decision making. And that's Paul Coffey to me on the bench, showing him the tape and showing, hey, I know you're trying to just shut down this offense. And I know you want to take that puck and move it north. But in a situation like that, you just can't go in the neutral zone there. So that's coaching for me. That's showing this kid how to play the right way. Look at your partner and the way he plays. And I think that can be a lot better. It's just breakdowns and, teaching them constructively how to be more engaged and more aggressive in a smart way.
We threw the question over to our viewers on YouTube as well. So if you're watching live on the Daily Faceoff YouTube, you can have a vote out of those 4: Mini, Edmonton, New York Islanders, and the Calgary Flames. Who can turn it around this season? Speaking of the YouTube, State of Survival is in and wanted our take on the Patrik Laine situation. Obviously healthy scratch. Then he came out and said it was the most embarrassing thing in his career. Luke, what's it like in a hockey room when something turns toxic between a star player and the team? Because everything in Columbus is going bad, but that Laine situation is right at the top of the list.
Yeah, this just seems like a toxic organization in general. Starting, I heard Frank, you talking about Jarmo and the culture that he's created there is just backwards. I can't imagine what a locker room is like that. You see a lot more players these days. It was way different from when I was in the league, where players are so vocal about the stuff they're not happy about. Talk about Zadorov in the trades, but even not playing and coming out and really telling media, fans, viewers, and your teammates about how you truly feel about the situation is something that I think has really turned in the last couple years. And listen, I get it. He's not happy about it, but I think the coaching staff and a situation like that, you got to kind of know the player. And I don't know if healthy scratching a guy, no matter how bad he's playing, if you watch some of his shifts and the games he's been putting together, it's not pretty. But there's players that react well to constructive criticism and holding them accountable, and there's players that don't, right? Rick Tocchet has sat down JT Miller. He sat down Andrei Kuzmenko in Vancouver, and these guys say, you know what? I haven't been good enough. Like, I have to be better. I know that. Laine just does not seem like that type of guy that's going to take this well and say, you know what? This is on me. I have to be better. This is the most I've been embarrassed in my whole life. Well, then play better, bud. Like, just play better. Like, go over and watch your tape and you tell me that you should be playing in the lineup every night. So it's the start of a separation here. I think, like, I don't know how much longer he's going to be in a jacket uniform, and
who's going to take him. That's the problem that you've worked yourself into. And I was wondering, Luke, if in an odd way you would think that with so many players maligned, Laine unhappy, Gaudreau unhappy, you've got Ken Johnson in the minors, David Jiricek probably unhappy. Wouldn't they all just band together and kind of, screw management kind of thing? The problem is they're not getting any support from their coach, who quite clearly is in lockstep with management. If you want any insight on how Jarmo Kekalainen thinks about and feels about players, just look at the people he's hired. John Tortorella, Mike Babcock, now Pascal Vincent walking around with an absolute hammer every day, swinging it at everyone. I mean, this is the situation that they've created. I just don't know the way out of it.
100%. And, it's a situation where, I love you saying them turning on him like that, but it's a situation where you could see there's a clear disconnect even between coaching and management. It's like they're not on the same page either. And what are you going to do with a guy like Laine? his what he's worth is the lowest it's ever going to be right now. So I look at it like a Huberdeau situation in Calgary. Like, you're not probably going to be able to move this for what you want now. You have to make it work. You have to make it work. Get him out of the center ice position. First of all, let him play on the wing. There's less defensive responsibility. I was a winger. I know there's way less responsibility as a winger. I know you have to be good on your walls and stuff, but playing down low, get him away from the center ice position, try him out with some different lines, move him up and down the lineup. But for now, you have to maximize his value and let him do something out there. I just don't think healthy scratching him is the way to go here with this kid.
Yeah, I like that you said that too, because we've seen him in Winnipeg and in Columbus now at different times be very, very hard on himself. Good stuff, Luke. The YouTube chat, they are dead split on the Oilers and the Wild as the team that can turn it around. Frank, I'll let you be the tiebreaker for the YouTube. Me and Luke both said Edmonton as well, but what say you?
I was thinking Edmonton the whole time. The more this drags on, the more it just feels like something isn't right. And I math wise, I know they can get themselves out. I just think at least the way they're playing right now, Minnesota has a better chance.
Yeah, and they're a little bit.
I also think they're in an easier division.
Yeah, the Central's way up for grabs too. And you can never use that 14 mil in dead cap space as an excuse, but Bill Guerin is not happy with the way those guys are playing, and rightfully so.
New episode of Frankly Speaking with Bill Guerin out now as well. Good plug, Luke. That's a good veteran broadcaster move right there. We appreciate you hopping on, man. Thanks for doing this.
See you guys next week.
Move along to our daily face-off inbox question, Frank. Hashtag AskTFO. A little 14-game slate up today in the NHL. Almost every team in action. I think we got a board here with the matchups for you. Which one of these games has you the most intrigued tonight around the league?
Oh, there's some good ones. I would say Winnipeg, Tampa will be pretty good. The Penguins have played a lot better of late, and the Rangers are coming off of a loss and Panarin's point streak ending. But I'm probably going to go with Boston and Florida. That is a true heavyweight tilt. And I know this is wrong to bring up, but it is kind of hard to look away from the Oilers. It's kind of like watching a car crash this season. So definitely we'll have an eye on that.
For me, it's going to be Vegas-Dallas. Two absolute wagons out west, Frank. Two division leaders going toe-to-toe here. So I'm going to be dialed in to that Vegas-Dallas game for a couple of reasons, one of which is financial. Let's move along to our Vatrano daily bets, and I'm going to be riding with the underdog in that matchup. Frank, Dallas and Vegas going toe-to-toe, and you got the Vegas Golden Knights sitting at plus 112 on the money line. I like this spot with them as road dogs here against the Dallas Stars. I think it's a bit of a coin flip matchup, but I'll give Vegas the edge, taking them as dogs. The other plus money bet I have cooked up today, I love my little shot prop strategy. Two guys set at 1.5. You play them together, you get plus 150. You don't have to be hitting at 50% with this strategy to be profitable long term. Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, whenever he doesn't hit his shot prop, the line seems to be dropping to 1.5, and he bounces back and hits it the next game almost every single time. He's playing away from both McDavid and Draisaitl tonight, according to Oilers Morning Skate. So I like that. He's going to be the one handling the puck. Minus 154. JVR missed it in the last game. He hasn't missed it back-to-back all season. So play these two together at plus 156 for a pretty nice price tag on a parlay that I think's got a pretty good shot at hitting. And that brings us to garbage time today, Frank. It is brought to you by Wendy's and our new daily face-off survivor game where you can compete for real prizes. You can also use the brand new, very real Wendy's app to get yourself lunch today. You collect points, you eat your Wendy's, and then you can use those points to cash in for more free food at a later date. It's a win-win with the new Wendy's app. We got the little turkey in the bottom of our screen, Frank. So what do you got for garbage time?
I actually want to flip it back to you. As I mentioned, you're making your first U.S. Thanksgiving appearance coming down to Philly. You're in New York now. So you're going to hang with us for the next few days. What are you most looking forward to about the U.S. Thanksgiving experience that might be different than Canadian Thanksgiving in early October?
So I have heard it's more of an all-day event. Like Thanksgiving in Canada, at least for my family, has always just been like, yeah, you go have dinner and then like that's kind of it, right? But I think this is going to be like a 12-hour affair, isn't it, Frank?
Yeah, I mean, we definitely will crack a beverage pretty early on Thursday. The football starts at 12 noon, if I'm not mistaken. So that's a win. And yeah, I think it just kind of rolls on through. Dinner is kind of early. Dinner is like a 3-4 o'clock thing. And then you keep boozing the rest of the night.
Do you do the yams with like the marshmallow stuff on top?
Yes. Yeah. And in fact, I
Okay.
nearly caused a house fire because it said, hey, put those in the broiler. And they just got a little too close to the actual broiling. And yeah, it was like one of those situations where, in Christmas Vacation where they have that the fire because the uncle is smoking the stogie and everything. Well, like my grandma was sitting real close to the oven at the time that we had an incident here, flames shooting out of the oven, and we quick had to just pick her up in the stool and be like, "Get away!" So anyway, yeah.
That'll
Almost
be good.
killed her.
Our pal Colby Cohen is in the YouTube chat, by the way, Frank, and he says, Tyler, you better start drinking early. Carolina manages the puck pretty well. So all jokes from Colby Cohen. Frank, we're going to be off tomorrow. No show for American Thanksgiving. Then Friday, a little Black Friday edition of the program with Matt Larkin and Stephen Ellis. So you can look forward to that on Friday. To all of our American viewers, happy Thanksgiving. Hope you enjoyed the day. Hope you enjoy the food. And thank you for tuning in to our Thanksgiving special here on Daily Faceoff Live. We'll chat with you again on Friday.
Thanks for tuning in to Daily Faceoff Live. Make sure you hit the subscribe button to never miss an episode.